Hello everyone, it is Karina with Karina Loves to Plan. Thank you for joining me in my little corner of the internet where I talk all things planners, fountain pens, and fountain pen inks. And today I'm going to do a years later review of the Esterbrook Estie. And I wanted to do this because I feel like in the last year or so, Esterbrook Esties have changed a little bit in terms of what's being offered, how often new releases are coming out, and things like that. And even the models of the Esterbrook Estie I have are from, I'm just looking back here, from a few years ago. The last Estie that I purchased was back in April of 2025, and I haven't purchased another one since then. So, and these three, I think one is from, let's see here, Honeycomb was purchased in 2023, and then these two were both purchased in 2024. So I feel like there have been definitely some changes to the types of models, but also the finishes. And I wanted to take all of that into consideration while doing this years later review. And funny enough, when I look at my collection and my preferences over the years, my very first Esterbrook Estie was the, oh, where is it? It was the Nouveau Bleu. And I got that in March of 2023. That was my very first Esterbrook Estie. I no longer have that. These are the only three Esties that I still have in my collection. And with Nouveau Bleu, or Bleu, I loved that. I fell in love with Esterbrook Esties from that point onwards. And I just thought, you know, what a really comfortable pen and things like that. So now I'm going to basically do a review and go over things like the measurements, but also a few questions that, you know, only somebody who's been using the pens over a certain amount of years or certain time are really able to answer better than you can in an unboxing. So let's get started. All right, so just to reiterate, like, I have owned a total of 9 Esterbrook Esties in my lifetime, and I am now down to 3. And I've owned, for example, the first one I had was Nouveau Bleu, and then I had Petrified Forest, and then I had Rainforest. I've also had Quirky Leaf and the Coffee Monsters Co., the Tortoise. So those I've sold, but now I have left remaining Honeycomb, Lilac, and Once in a Blue Moon. So what I'm going to do now is show you, I guess, the measurements that are important for me when it comes to the Esterbrook Estie. So first off, the length of the body, which is basically the length uncapped, and the length of that is 127 millimeters. Now capped, it is, let me see here, 70 millimeters. That actually seems wrong. Sorry, I'm looking at my measurements here. The length of this uncapped, oh no, my apologies. That's the length of the cap. The length of the body overall is 127, but length when it's capped, oh my gosh, my brain, this is 149.1 millimeters. And then the length when it's posted is 170.3 millimeters. Okay, I'm getting there at the end. Now the diameter, or the width, so the width of the body is 13.3 millimeters. And then the diameter of the grip, which is one of the most important things to me, is 10.8 millimeters. This is basically the comfort spot for me. Anywhere between like 10 and 12 millimeters is the comfort spot for me. And also for the body, anywhere from 13 to maybe 14, or yeah, about 14 is where it's comfortable for me. Now I know that's different for every person, but these are very, very comfortable for me, especially where I hold my pen and how I hold my pen. And I don't ever hold my pen posted, but you certainly can post this pen, and it's actually a little back heavy with the cap, but again, very comfortable if you do like to post your pen. So then the weight of the pen when it is capped is 24 grams. And then when it's uncapped, it is 15 grams. Now the nib on this is a Jowo number 6 nib. And then with the filling the filling mechanism in these is normally a cartridge converter, but now there are some new models that have that push button filler. So you can have either the cartridge converter, which is what I have in my 3 pens, or the push button filler. So those are the measurements or some of the technical specs of the Esterbrook Estie. So now let's get down to the nitty gritty of these questions. First important question, is this good for long or short writing sessions? For me, the Esterbrook Estie is very good for long writing sessions. It is one of the most comfortable pens that I have ever tried throughout my whole fountain pen planning journey. I lost my words there for a second, but it is very, very comfortable for me. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. With the way that I hold my pen, it rests very comfortably in the perlicue of my hand, and where I rest my fingers, the threads are not sharp at all. And then the grip section as well is a good width so that I don't feel like with the narrower grip sections, I feel like I'm really trying to hold on to the pen to make sure it doesn't fall out of the hand, whereas bigger grip sections allow me to loosen up on that grip, which is why it's a lot more comfortable for me. Now, I know some people are like, your nails are too long, it's going to be so close to the nib, but honestly, with the way that I hold my pens, this is really comfortable for me for long writing sessions. Next question, is this better with wet or dry inks? And honestly, it's great with both. The Jowo nib is generally a very consistent nib and works well with both dry or wet inks, but I think at the end of the day, it's definitely a personal preference. If you like your inks wetter, this works well, but if you have drier inks that need a little bit of a push to be wetter, these can also help with that. So it's not necessarily a drier or a wetter nib. It works well with both. And I think that's why I like the Jowo number 6 nib. Generally, it's not going to be, you know, the top performing nib, but it is a very reliable, consistent nib. Next question is, does it have feedback or is it smooth? Now with the Jowo number 6, it is smooth with feedback. So nothing like sailor feedback, just a little bit of feedback to make you feel like you can feel the paper at the end of your pen, but nothing like the feedback of a sailor, for example. And it is smooth, but not as smooth as like a Pilot Fine nib, for example. Those are like buttery, glassy, smooth, and that's absolutely okay. I'm okay with the amount of smoothness and feedback that I can get from a Jowo number 6 nib. It's not something that I feel needs to be, you know, one way or the other. Super feedback or super smooth. It almost feels like it's just got that right balance of both. And then the next question, do they stain? Now, with the one model of the Esterbrook Estie that I had, that Coffee Monsters Co., that had the, I say plain, but like the off-white or the cream body, it didn't, I didn't get a chance to really test if it would stain because I didn't want to test that, but I'm sure for something like that it would stain. So I would say yes, depending on the color of the resin. So I'm sure lighter resins would stain, but then I think the darker ones, so for example, my Blue Moon, probably not going to stain as much, but I think the lighter resins, the ones that aren't cracked ice like this, so possibly the, let me just look here at the model, the Quirky Leaf or the Coffee Monsters Co., the ones without the cracked ice can definitely stain, but I haven't tested that out to really see. Next question, is this pen comfortable in the hand? And I'm going to say OMG, yes. When I first not purchased, but when I was first, I won my Nouveau Bleu in a giveaway from PenChalet. I remember when I first felt this pen and started writing with it, I was like, these are the exact dimensions of a pen that are so comfortable in the hand. And for a good couple of years, every time I had a new pen day or unboxed a new pen, I was always comparing it to the comfort level of the Esterbrook Estie, because at that point in my life, this was the most comfortable pen in my collection. And it still is. It's still one of the most comfortable pens in my collection. The way that it sits in my hand, just like so, the threads, but also the way that it's balanced when it is uncapped or unposted like this is absolutely perfect for me. So yes, absolutely comfortable in the hand. The next question, is this an everyday carry pen or best left at desk pen? Now, I feel like that is definitely a personal preference question. Some people will not want to take this pen out and about because of its price point, and they don't want to risk having this lost or broken, while others, based on, I guess, the relative price point of this pen compared to the rest of the pens in their collection, this one is okay to be brought out and about. I will actually probably be traveling with this sometime next week, so I'm okay with bringing this out and about with me, but it's also good to be left at the desk. But I think overall, in relation to the other pens in my collection, I would call this an everyday carry, with the caveat that, again, that is absolutely personal. And I say this because the price point actually of this, it feels like the price point of this has changed over the years depending on which model you're buying. So I actually just looked on, for example, Goulet Pen's website, and the Botanical Gardens is selling for $175.50 US. But then the Nouveau Bleu, when it was being released at PenChalet, it was $195 US. And then if you're purchasing from Esterbrook themselves, it can be a bit more expensive than that as well. So it was, when I purchased it back in February 2024, the Esterbrook Lilac, it was $200.24, but I think I had a 10% code for that, so I think it was $220. And then the Honeycomb, when I purchased that from Atlas Stationers, that had a needlepoint nib, so that was a little bit more expensive as well. And then now you have some of the limited editions that are coming out in specific resins, or the prototypes, and those ones are upwards of like $300. And really what you're paying for with those is the limited edition resins or the prototypes, rather than any big changes to the nib or the overall design. So in that case, and I feel like I've gone off into a tangent here, in that case, you know, that the pricing of Esterbrook over the years has definitely changed. I'm going to actually address that a little bit towards the end. And then the next question, how are they with shimmer and sheen inks? Wonderful. I mean, I don't use sheen inks, but they work really well with my shimmer inks. And I think the only shimmer inks that I do have any trouble with have been ones like Robert Oster, because of how big their shimmer particles are. Robert Oster shimmer inks clog every single one of my pens, and not just the Jowo nibs on the Esties. Generally, if I have a diamine shimmer ink in here, it works wonderfully. So again, it really depends, I think, on the shimmer ink themselves rather than just the pen performing with that ink. And then lastly, what is my preferred paper? My preferred paper, and it's going to be the same across, is my Tomoe River paper. And this one, I believe, is the Sanzen paper from maybe 2023, I believe it was. And I love it, and I don't have any issues with this paper. It's smooth. It has a little bit of shadowing and bleed through, but not too bad, especially with the Estie. I think what is really affecting the paper is the ink itself and how wet it is and how it performs on this particular paper. So those are the, I guess, criteria that I look at when I'm looking at my years later review. But one other thing that I wanted to look at is how Esterbrook Esties have changed over the last few years. I remember in, I think, 2023, when I first got Nouveau Bleu, they weren't doing as many new releases of different colorways of Esties. And I remember back then thinking, like, I'm going to go and own every single Esterbrook Estie, just like Connie, who has an amazing collection of Esterbrook Esties. And that at one point was my goal. And then over time, the more that I did purchase, I was really honing down on, or curating my collection on what and how I wanted it to be. So I realized I don't need to own every single Esterbrook Estie. But what they've done in the last year or so is the number of new releases have come out has been a lot more than what a lot of us, I think, are used to. There's a lot more of these prototypes or limited editions that are coming out, a lot more collaborations. So it's definitely a lot for the everyday consumer, being inundated with new releases almost every month, which I feel like wasn't the case back in 2023 or 2024. I feel like 2025 really was a lot of new releases, a lot of prototypes. And with these prototypes, because they're so limited, the price on these is going to be much higher than what you would find on, I guess, regular in-stock models. So a lot of conversations that I've seen around the Esterbrook Estie are that maybe because they're producing so many new pens that sometimes the quality control can decrease a little bit because of how much they're producing, but also this drive to come out with different collaborations, which is great. It can be a lot. It can be a lot. And the increase in the price is not always a reflection of better quality of pen. Really what you're paying for is the fact that it's a limited edition rather than an actual better overall nib or pen or anything like that. So I just wanted to quickly comment on that. These 3 pens that I purchased, the Once in a Blue Moon was purchased second hand from Ginger Peachy Pens, and actually 2 days before that I had purchased the Lilac Estie and then this Honeycomb needlepoint. I remember I saw this at my first Pelican Hub here in Edmonton. I remember it was Cassie who had the Honeycomb, and as soon as I saw it in person, I'm like, I have to have it. And these are the 3 that will stay with me because this one has a needlepoint nib, which I love. This one started with a medium nib, but it's now been ground down by Gina to an extra fine with a reverse architect. And then the Lilac has my love of extra fine nibs in here. So overall, Esterbrook Estie, you know, from previous years, a very good consistent pen. Some people find it a little bit too high in terms of his price point for a Yovo No. 6 steel nib. But again, some people are willing to pay that price and others aren't, and that's completely a personal thing. I don't foresee myself buying any other Esterbrook Esties unless there is a lovely green one other than Jurassic. I know I've seen Jurassic there and it's beautiful and it's not available anymore. I don't need it. I don't need it. I'm happy with my collection as it is, and I don't foresee myself adding any more. All right, but that is it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any questions about this Years Later review, or if you have other pens that you would like me to do a review of like this, please let me know down below. And let me know your thoughts on everything here that I've said today, because yeah, a conversation would be great. Anyway, thanks again for watching and have yourselves a great day.